Good morning and welcome back to Connect for Health, the live wellbeing and webinar and podcast from Cigna Healthcare, Middle East and Africa, produced with a little bit of help from Mentl. I'm Scott Armstrong. I am the founder of Mentl, a platform that tackles the stigma of mental health. And I'm joined, as always, by my marvelous co-host, Maissa Al Khafajy, the head of government affairs and strategic communications at Cigna Healthcare, Middle East and Africa. Today's topic is a very, very important one. How are you sleeping? I don't know if you're like me. I am absolutely shattered, and I feel like the bags under my eyes are becoming the suitcases that I need to check in. Across the Gulf, many residents are living with this kind of mix of gratitude and strain. We're hearing noises that we know are designed and are keeping us safe. But how do we turn that off so we can get a good night's sleep? And as one expert said on a podcast recently, the difference between hope and despair is a good night's sleep. We are joined today by an amazing guest, Dr. Samira Cutts, neuroscientist and occupational therapist at King's College Hospital, London, UAE. A quick reminder before we get into the conversation, if you are joining us live, please ask your questions. We love your questions. We've got a lot of people on the webinar today and from across the region I've seen as well, from Qatar, Saudi, Jordan. Hello to all of you, Bahrain as well. Yes, so if you are joining live, please get your questions in and we will be asking you poll questions. If you're watching on YouTube or catching up on our podcast channel, you won't be able to get involved in the live interactivity, but please reach out to Cigna Healthcare for details of membership. With that said, Maissa, Samira, how are we all sleeping?
There is a lot going on at the moment. And so what I really want to do is just delve into some of the science today to really shed some light on the way that our brain is working during times of uncertainty. And so it's about managing people's expectations of what to expect from their sleep and how their brain is trying to keep them safe during this period of uncertainty. And therefore, I think once we start to shed some light on the science behind stress resilience and stress surveillance and threat vigilance, then everything will sort of fall into place in terms of understanding why we are sleeping the way we are sleeping. And also, in order to try and take back some element of control and to help calm the brain down. But even when you do that, we are still in an environment that is uncertain. That's a real threat. And so it's about managing our expectations around how should our body and our mind be expected to behave during this period. What's normal? What's not normal? What can you do? When should you ask for help?
Well, I suppose this is a really big question. We can explore over the next hour, but what is normal in this situation?
There is a very real physical and psychological threat. And so our brain immediately goes into a system that's been designed since the beginning of age to keep us safe. And that is purely to survive. It's designed for survival. And so what happens is at the moment, we are in a state where that chronic threat is keeping our stress axes activated all the time. And as a result, we have high levels of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline that are constantly activated, constantly triggered. Typically, in a usual circumstance, they are only triggered for short periods of time. You then replenish your stores, recover, relax, ready for the next threat. But right now, because of the uncertainty, it's several times a day, and then maybe not anything for another day, and then several times the other day, and at different periods of day and afternoon and evening. And so it's all very erratic and disruptive. It's not just the cortisols and the stress hormones that are involved. It's also specific elements of our brain network, such as the amygdala, which is very much our threat detection system. So right now, our brains are really going in depth, working very, very hard to constantly scan any kind of threat because that's been activated for several weeks. It's not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it's been designed to do to keep us safe and to survive. And so, even if everybody is trying to calm down their body and their minds, and they're doing all the things they're supposed to do to relax, it's not going to be like a normal situation where you can truly relax, because it can't override your nervous system that is genuinely believing and perceiving a dangerous situation. And so, on on some level, it's constantly activated. It needs to be vigilant so that it can react and jump into action when things escalate. And so, as much as you can try and dampen things with different strategies, at the moment, the brain needs to do its job to help us to survive. And so that will always take priority over things like trying to get a really good sleep. So it's not failure. This is our actual innate biology that's at work and at play at the moment. And I think a lot of people aren't perhaps familiar with that.
I find that really, really fascinating because, and as someone who's had therapy in the past for anxiety, when it was explained to me that my body, usually our body reacts to a threat, and often a lot of the anxiety in the modern day world is about the lion. There's no actual lion, there is no actual, threat. Whereas this time we're actually living, and a bit like COVID, I guess, we are living where there is an external factor that is a threat. So, how important is it for people to give themselves a little bit of slack here and understand that actually that trouble sleeping is kind of normal in this situation?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So it's about understanding the goalposts have now moved. We are not working with the
Right.
usual environment, the usual expectations. There is a very real physical threat where we do have to respond quite quickly or be able to adapt with a moment's notice. And as a result, our brain is activated in that mode to scan, to react at any given moment. And so now that the goalposts have changed, you have to expect to feel a little bit of edginess. You're not going to get a really, really deep, good quality sleep every single night. But that doesn't mean, because these are uncertain times where we don't know how long they're going to go on for. So there are short-term things that you can do. There are really, really tangible strategies that you can employ to help with recovery and to help to calm things down whenever you're able to. But that really is not going to be turned off unless you leave this particular environment or
Mhm.
the political circumstances change and safety has been restored. So until that happens, we are very much in survival mode.
So what I wanted to ask is, in in the interest of the conversation that we're having today, we're talking amongst a majority of us who are adults. Um, what and how does this translate to children? So I find that if I was going to give myself as an example, I used to find the alarms setting off more off-putting than some of the sounds that I would hear in the middle of the night. Because again, that was just
Mhm.
like coming to life from some sleep and like deep sleep. And then going back to sleep was very, very challenging because then your mind was just kind of like playing out all these scenarios. And there was always this kind of like tightness in the chest. And this is me as an adult. How
Mm.
would you describe or try to diffuse something like this in a younger person?
So, first and foremost, it's really important to remember, because children are so young, their nervous systems are far more immature, not as developed. They don't have the cognitive framework to really truly process threat in a narrative manner. So, what they do is they look for signs from their parents to try to understand, do I need to be afraid or am I safe?
Mhm.
So they take
Yeah.
their cues from their parents. The same can be said for sleeping. Now, in order for any human being to sleep, there has to be some element of, a relaxed environment, feeling relaxed in your body, feeling relatively safe. That can be achieved by co regulating with your parent. And so, in order for the children to support them to sleep better and to be more calm, parents need to model that behavior in themselves, which is, again, very challenging. But there are
Hmm.
opportunities for parents to understand, to separate things. So when they have conversations about what's going on politically or any new threats coming in, we don't always think about where you're having those conversations and where the children are.
Yeah.
Children are quite sneaky. They'll, you won't even know. So really trying to make a conscious effort to have those behind closed doors, being aware of your facial expressions. Children are so
Yeah.
perceptive to parents' non-verbal body language. Is their body tense? Do they have a serious look on their face? Are they behaving normally? So it's more those non-verbal signs that children will look out for in order to keep themselves safe, in order for them to assess their own safety. And so the answer to your question is to support children to sleep better. Essentially, the parents have to be more relaxed, create a safe environment, reassure their child, not by lying, but simply trying to create a safety within those few hours. And if they're relaxed, their bodies are relaxed, their mind is relaxed, their children will regulate from them, and then they will be able to relax.
That really gels with a couple of questions that are already coming in. Thank you, audience. I can see you're already very engaged around this topic because we've got related to that nighttime noise. We've got Crystal asking if it's normal and okay to turn off the phone alerts at night if they're negatively impacting sleep, or is it just
Mhm.
me? We've got Athari who's asking, how do we handle the anxiety of waking up to the alarm, which is kind of what we were talking about, the heartbeat increasing and then that difficulty going back to sleep. As you were saying, Mesa, kind of like not necessarily the sounds that we're hearing from outside, because actually we know that in my brain that's kind of like physically something is keeping me safe, as opposed to that thing that rips you out of deep sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then again, Mohammed, you've asked a question on social media, and we will definitely come back to that for now. So I'm going to speak to that one first, if you can, Samira. Athari saying,
Yeah.
how do we handle the anxiety of waking up, the heartbeat increase, and then that difficulty trying to go back to sleep?
Yeah, so there's some really nice things that you can do. So, of course, the
Mm.
alerts are really unpleasant and they get everything hit up and it activates things all over again. It normally takes about 30 minutes for that cortisol to die down. So, it does take a little bit of time. In that time, it's about reassurance. So, you've read the message, you're aware, but we don't have control over that. And I think one thing that is really, really important to emphasize and stress is go through things in terms of threat. It do is your do you have shelter? Yes, everybody's homes are intact, untouched,
Mhm.
unaffected by the dim. Is your immediate physical environment safe? Yes. Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have internet? Are you able to communicate with people on the outside? And so when you go through those very practical questions, what is immediately identified is yes, there is a threat, but right now I'm very, very safe. And I have been safe for several weeks. Therefore,
Mhm.
I don't need to act. I need to be aware and mindful and vigilant, but I don't need to panic or spring into action because the government have everything very well controlled and managed. And they are simply informing us. So it's about creating that reassurance in your body. And there are ways that you can do that physically as well by literally going through touching your heart, calming your heart, breathing slowly, bringing down your breathing rate in order to calm down your heart rate. Even just scanning your muscles in your body, because often different people react to stress in different way in terms of physical
Mm.
symptoms. Some people will have immediately increased heart rate patterns and breathing rate patterns. They'll feel palpitations. They may feel sweating. They may feel very physical sensations in their muscles and specific body parts, usually the extremities. They may have gut issues. So, what I would recommend is for each individual to really know how they physically respond to that stress response response first and foremost. And then if you are very aware of this is how I react physically to stress, you can go through those to systematically calm them down. And knowing that the cortisol takes about 30 minutes to kind of leave your body, you know that within 30 minutes, you're calm enough to be able to go back to sleep. But when you get more well versed with it, and like I say, I'm actually very good at being able to scan and assess how dangerous a situation is. It takes me seconds, if not minutes. So for me, the alerts don't really phase me. I find the noise more of a bother, but the actual alert itself, it doesn't really create a hypervigilance. So the more you repeat that behavior, your brain will respond to that because our brain responds from reinforcement. And so whatever you repeat frequently, that's what it will do more. So if you consistently have a practice in place when an alert goes off, you'll get used to responding in that way to an extent. And that will also help because this has been going on for several weeks. It's not just
Mm.
been a few days. So start putting in practices of how to manage the alerts, how to behave, what physical practice am I going to do to physically calm down my mind and my body? And then do that every single time.
I absolutely love that, and I think I've seen that even in my own house. Like, my wife Christina, like she would react to every single alarm like it was for the first time, and after weeks, we can't keep rolling with it. So, how important it is for us all to try and be intentional with our response, as opposed to just trying to react and deal with it almost like on a one-to-one basis. But this keeps going on and on and on. So we can't keep doing that. Otherwise, we're just going to end up utterly exhausted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I find that, and I don't know whether this is something that's, Scott, Samira, I don't know that this is something that you feel is a pattern, a behavioral pattern. But for me, at least, when an alert goes off, especially if I am asleep, which by the way hasn't really been the case so far because I've always got my phone on airplane mode, but when it does, there's this tendency to take a bit of a kind of like a gap to process. But then I find myself having to suddenly jump onto social media, check the news,
Wow.
and therein starts
It's
the
probably
doom
the worst.
scrolling. Yes.
Well,
And then
I'm
that
gonna
hangs
tag in
there.
as well. Yeah, I'm gonna tag in our audience here because we have had a few questions
Yeah,
coming in already.
yeah,
You know,
I'm
we've got
sure.
Lucy's just asked, how do you silence and calm the mind, particularly around with these social media?
Hmm.
Again, Mohammed was asking earlier as well, the uncertainty, cause of stress, never left social media news is a major contributing external factor. How do we calm the mind? And and Kareem as well, since everyone's following the news on social media, and there is a lot of inaccurate news and fake ones, loads of
Yeah.
recommendations on how to stay safe. How can one deal with things? To go to Mace's point, is what she's doing the absolute worst thing she could do in that situation?
Totally.
Yeah. I think it's very, very common because we don't really think about it. We just sort of act. But now that this has been going on for quite some time, in order to regain that control, it's normal when you're in a state of stress that our prefrontal cortex sort of switches off a little bit and the amygdala, the emotional center, takes over. So you then are much more impulsive. But because this has been going on for some time, you can rejig that a little bit by staying calm and then trying to really think about your behaviors and how you're responding. And this is a really nice question, actually, because I think everybody is, I guess, guilty of doing this to a certain extent. And there's a really nice way of actually managing it better because every time you actually check the news, that's another potential cortisol hit. And like I say, it takes at
Mm.
least 30 minutes for that to then leave your body. So the nervous system also, it doesn't really distinguish between what's important and what's background. So any kind of threat content is going to then activate your nervous again. And then intermittent, unpredictable threats is basically neurologically activating your pattern all the time in the same way. And like I say, if we do something frequently, we repeat it, it gets used to doing that, and then it fast tracks that system. So it's the worst possible thing you can do. Um,
Mm.
and then on top of that, the late night checks, you're not going to sleep at all. So in order for the brain to it needs certainty, and it needs to be done gathering information in order for you to be able to down regulate enough to sleep. So only have very, very, very specific time windows in your daytime to check the news. Because realistically, what are you going to do? Nothing. All you're doing, the only purpose it serves is to activate another threat response and not have sleep. And neither of those are going to be helpful. So don't check the phone. Leave it until the day. So maybe wake up, go for a walk, and then when you come back, that could be a window. And then another window perhaps in the afternoon. But you have to be very, very rigid and disciplined about really only having those times to check. Because if you are frequently checking, you're just constantly activating your stress axis every single time. And then your nerves feel fried, you feel fried, and
Yeah.
sleep is almost impossible.
Mukhtar, I hope that's helped you, because Mukhtar Mohammed had asked basically, should we be toning down social media because his mood drops after the news, and what's the best way to deal with that? Hopefully that helps you. But yeah, I mean, I think that fascinating from the scientific perspective as well, that every time we check it, that kind of cortisol clock starts, and we've just delayed sleep, or we've delayed feeling good for another 30 minutes. I'm going to bring the audience in. It's so engaged here. So I'm going to be kind of rolling between questions and all that sort of thing. But I think we should just quickly launch the first poll of this session if we can. So you should see in a moment the questions come up. What is your biggest sleep issue right now? Tell us what you're actually dealing with. And once again, I'm not going to purposely include an all of the above option. We want you to laser focus on what's causing you the most stress right now. But biggest sleep issue: falling asleep, waking up during the night, waking up too early, feeling restless or wired, vivid dreams or nightmares, or checking alerts, news, or messages at night. I think Maissa might be the guilty of the last one. If I was to ask you to guess, Samira, which do you think would be the biggest issue? And again, you can't say all of the above.
I think a lot of people are waking up during the night. I see a lot of patients
Yeah.
in clinic every day, so we talk about it. And the common theme that I've been hearing is people can get to sleep, but they just wake up several times a night. And the other issue I find is people are sleeping, but it's just not a good quality deep sleep.
Mm. Well, Macy, you were saying that as well at the beginning of the podcast, weren't you? That even when you are sleeping, you feel like it's deep, but you're waking up from it and you still feel tired.
Yeah, I mean, like just this morning, I don't know whether it's also the fact that, Samira did say it's overcast today. Sometimes that makes me feel a little bit more groggy and lethargic. But what I've interestingly found is I'll have deep sleep but still feel tired. But then I also have a tendency of going to bed late because I'm guilty of checking the news and, doom scrolling, but then also waking up early. So it's almost like I get to that point where I am so tired and I'm just, that's it, drifting. And then it'll be a few hours and then I feel like, oh, I'm up.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
we can see from the poll, yeah, it's that waking during the night, and also
Hmm.
checking news alerts or messages at night. I mean, that accounts for literally more than half the people on this webinar, and we've got a lot of people on this webinar. Um, I wanted to ask you a question, because there's so many great questions coming in, and I'm trying to get through all of them for our audience. Um, which is also, I've seen this in my house as well. I'm just going to scroll back through Malay Prasanna, how to cope with helplessness as a parent or as a normal human being. And also then, I think it was, where are we? Bogdan as well. Like, let's face it, we all are differently built and we respond randomly. We cannot ignore the reality. You can't pretend it's there. Even if you can't control it. And that's the interesting one, because you were saying to me as well, like, okay, so you check the news, what are you going to do? Nothing. I know, and my wife Christina, she knows I'm not being disparaging. She would literally admit to this. She is someone who likes to control her environment. And we are in a period of time where there are some things that are outside of our control. And you were
Mhm.
saying the brain likes certainty. How do we, I don't know, cross that bridge or find a way to deal with that uncertainty? Particularly, some people are good with rolling with situations, and they can delay the stress until the end of a process, perhaps. I feel like that's perhaps the way I'm wired. I don't know how you are, Mesa, but my wife and a number of the people, they do react differently. And
Mhm.
we need to have compassion for that as well.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think with the helplessness, that was pretty much, waking up to the news this morning. That was what I felt was a very profound emotion, feeling completely helpless, and that already set the tone for the day, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
And obviously, that's going to maintain right through to bedtime, no matter what I try to do. So I think it's very intentional and we should be very mindful of, how we set the tone for the day with things that are beyond our control. But Samira, please tell us what you
Yeah, for
think.
me, it's really, really interesting, actually. I think for me, that sort of this conversation and this particular question opens it up to a much wider issue. Obviously, being
Mhm.
a cognitive neuroscientist, I work with many different individuals with diverse circuitry of their brains. Our brains are all incredibly unique, like a fingerprint almost. And
Mm.
all of the premise of my work clinically and from an educational stance is to support people to be the best human that they can be. And
Mhm.
the way to do that is by really understanding your specific brain and how it's working and where are the weak links. Now, we talk about the learned helplessness, and we talked about how some people just don't know how to remain calm and they need to have control. What that
Mhm.
tells me about that particular individual is that in a regular day, discounting what's happening at the moment in times of uncertainty, but just generally in life, if you're somebody that needs a high level of control, that's a weak link. And it's about
Mhm.
going back to yourself and exploring why do you need that control? Because you don't have trust in yourself, of your capabilities, of your skills to be able to protect yourself, keep yourself safe, and to be able to survive another day. And that will always go back to something earlier in childhood, some experiences and some unresolved issues. Um, and so now that we're in this time of uncertainty, all of these things are being exposed in everybody. Where are their weak links? And that's why everybody is responding differently. So there is always work to be done in our health, in our physical health and our brain health. And for me, brain health is very much physical health. And our brain health is very much an integration and amalgamation of the physical elements along with the psychological and emotional elements. They are all one and the same because we are human beings. And so, what this has really shed light on is people tend to separate their psychological and emotional health from their physical health, and they don't do much work
Mm.
on specific elements of their brain health. So, in this type of situation, you really need to have a brain with a very open growth mindset that is able to take on and understand the risk and the safety issues, but still know within themselves that they are very capable. And that comes from experiences in life where you have experienced failure and overcome them and survived, and remembering those experiences. It comes from really truly believing in yourself and having that self worth and having a strong sense of identity. So, you see how all of these very strong psychological themes are now really coming into play in a very practical manner. And people aren't really understanding what they're seeing and why they are behaving in this way. And it comes back down to your own personal and individual brain health. How good is your cognitive health? How strong are you psychologically? Are you mentally resilient? Are you okay with failure? Because you know that even if you fail, you're still going to find a way to figure it out because you don't give up, because you have a growth mindset. And so if you pay attention, you'll know where to do the work. And again, it's okay. Everybody has work to do. Nobody is a machine. Nobody is perfect. We all have weak links and aspects that we can further strengthen. And it's just simply about being objective and saying, okay, I don't think I respond well to this. So I'm finding this a struggle. Let me go and do the work. And so if you're able to create enough safety right now in these times in your immediate environment and within yourself, you're able to pay attention to these things. But I think at the moment, a lot of people aren't quite there. But perhaps once this improves, they can use this as a great platform to understand their brains and their health a lot better to then be able to fill in the gaps, hopefully.
I'll stay with this just for a little moment. We did have a question from Pearljeet, who was asking, how do we manage our response to this situation if it triggers something deeper from our childhood or previous trauma? And yes, another one of our audience members who had who had grown up in Lebanon and also has family in Lebanon, obviously watching the news and that sort of thing. And so that's triggering that childhood memory for those. And I know I have issues sleeping linked to my childhood trauma. Last night, again, I woke up had a dream connected to that, and woke up in a cold sweat, very, very hot, but cold sweat, feeling super dizzy, like I'm going to faint. So how can people, what can we do about this? Because this is going to be something
Yeah.
that's not only just something that we're living through, but for many people will be quite triggering.
Absolutely. I think it's such a great point to discuss in order to create further support. People can go about really getting the right support that they need. And
Mm.
it's a testing time, and it's so much more challenging if you're an individual that had very specific childhood traumatic experiences and perhaps have elements or definitely have complex PTSD, because that's when the brain is really triggered. It will immediately go back to that childhood memory and re-experience all of the horrific and negative feelings that were experienced in that childhood moment, like it's happening today. And then it will take that and completely associate it with what's happening right now and make you believe that you are under such a high level of threat, like you were back when you were a child. Now,
Mm.
for those individuals experiencing something quite high level like that, it is very important to work with a trained, licensed professional, psychologist and psychiatrist to help you to go through and create immediate safety, because I don't believe these high level challenges can be tackled alone. And everybody does need to have that village support to guide them through. If you have that in place and that's already going on, what's creating safety? Control the controllables. You have to constantly talk to your brain. Now, everybody makes an assumption that every thought that enters your head is real and it's yours and you own it. And that's not the case. You get to choose. I always see it like a conveyor belt on the Yo Sushi, the Yo Sushi restaurant, and you have the little pots of sushi and you pick and you choose which sushi pot you want. Thoughts are exactly the same thing. So they will come in, a bundle of thoughts. You, in terms of your decision making and that prefrontal cortex and the cognitive side of your brain, need to decide, yeah, I agree with that thought. That makes sense. I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to own that. That is my thought. But with the ones that don't fit, and the ones that don't fit are the ones that are unhelpful and unrealistic, let them go by. But to do that, you have to be so disciplined, because when you're in this situation, typically people will believe everything and they have to be challenged. So it's like reframing it. We call that cognitive reframing, where you challenge your thoughts. So then essentially you're then going to challenge the behavior that's associated with that thought. So that has to be at the forefront of one of your strategies, and something that you have to do throughout your day to really be disciplined, And like I say, the more you do it, the more you repeat a particular behavior, the quicker, the faster your brain gets at understanding that, and it does it more. So start to repeat behaviors that are helping you and let go of behaviors that are not helping you by not giving them attention. Safety is very, very, very important. It's not something you can just talk through. You have to physically feel safe in your body. And there are several strategies that you can do. Movement is such a wonderful somatic form of therapy. Walking, any kind of low intensity physical activity is really, really great to calm your nervous system down and to physically create safety in your body. And a lot of people really underestimate how valuable this is. And in these times, everybody should be exercising every single day, even if it's just for 10 minutes. And it can be as simple as walking. So when people say, I don't have access, or I don't know how, or I'm limited because I have specific physical challenges, most people can walk. And that is really should be a non-negotiable. And grounding, feeling the earth beneath your feet, it it really speaks to your nervous system because you're connecting with the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. We have an electromagnetic field within our bodies. So it has a very, very physical grounding experience that helps to relax your body. So these things, they sound a bit airy fairy or silly, but they're very deeply scientifically based. And they are the core things that we should be doing as humans to reclaim our nervous system in terms of creating safety.
This is music to my ears because I don't believe that it's like, having your head with the fairies. I am a huge advocate of, as you said, Samira, just really trying to plug into nature and disconnect and disassociate to some degree from this, constructed reality that's out there. Um, my question is, what would you do in the case of, because this is all and well when you're awake, what would you do, or what could you do in the way of a tactical or tactical approaches when you are, in bed, struggling to find sleep, drifted off to sleep, woke up, and you have that spiked cortisol as you described? What are the things? I mean, you went through being discerning with some of the thoughts, some of the emotions, breath work. Would you be able to suggest in that particular context what else could one be able to do to facilitate that kind of like lowering of the cortisol and that fried nervous system?
Yeah, there's several practical things that we could do. I'm a huge advocate for having a very, very clear, strict, rigid sleep hygiene practice.
Mm.
So this has to start about 3 hours before you go to bed. Now, first and foremost, it's our body's circadian rhythm that controls our sleep pattern. And our circadian rhythm is governed by light. And so it gets cues from the environment as to what time of the day it is, and therefore will release different types of hormones in our body for sleep several hours before. So important natural hormone that our body releases in order for us to sleep. But melatonin is massively disrupted if we have excessive light 3-4 hours before we sleep. If caffeine, that also has an impact on the hormone release. So a tangible thing that you can do is making sure you don't drink. So caffeine normally has a 7 to 9 hour life in our body. So you really need to stop drinking caffeine by midday, no later than early afternoon. And even then, no more than like 2-3 cups. But in this circumstance, I would just say keep it to one maximum a day. And then the light element. So again, device use, because it emits blue light. Blue light activates our nervous during the evening. Again, several hours before we even go to bed, you want to really have a dim red light, because red light activates the nervous system so that it tells it that we're going to go to sleep soon. So these are things that you are within your control and that you can use. But like I say, it's not going to happen after just 1 or 2 nights. It takes time for your body to learn about these cues and to understand what you're trying to say to it. So you have to have these behaviors and routines in place for days and weeks. So normally it will take about 2 weeks for your brain to really get it. So you have to be rigid, even if you don't see improvements immediately. Persevere. And after about 2 weeks, your brain will get it. So 2 to 3 hours before, you also want to drop the temperature of the room because you need to be able to sleep in a cold room to get to sleep. So that's three things already: temperature, the lighting, the caffeine use. Again, really, really think about what your brain those hours before sleep. So if you are looking at the news, if you're having a stressful conversation, maybe not even about what's going on, but just a stressful conversation with your partner, that can make a difference. If you're still working at home on your laptop, that's going to make a difference. That really helps your brain to downregulate, because again, that's an internal cue that you're getting ready for bed. Your brain needs to know that you want it to go to sleep, and it needs to feel safe enough to go to sleep. And so these are very tangible things that let's say it's bedtime and you're getting ready for bed. I'm a believer in not having your device, your phone next to your bed. Um, Even just the physical sight of your phone is enough to make you feel threatened. I know that there was a question: have your phone in your room, is that dangerous? I like to have it just outside of my room. I also turn off the Wi-Fi in the house because it can emit also the radiation can also disrupt your circadian rhythm. And I actually have been doing this my entire adult life, not just now. So when you practice this really strict sleep hygiene practice, the more your brain is reinforced. It has very physical cues. I also drink peppermint tea in bed, so that's a very physical cue as well. So that's what you want to embed in your routine, your habits. So having consistent, regular routines and behaviors that are very, very healthy and are going to cue your brain for bed is going to put you in the absolute highest and best position to be having a successful night's sleep. So there are very, very tangible things that people can do to control that.
So I'm going to bring in the second poll. And one of the questions aloud, yeah, you remind me there, Samira, of that old phrase, which is, when is the best time to do sleep hygiene? A month or 2 or 3 or 4 months ago. The second best time, of course, is to start today. But our second poll to talk about the next 7 days. Audience, what do you think would help you the most over the next 7 days? Would it be a better wind down routine? Samira talking us through there, a really good way of approaching that. A plan for waking up at night. And again, Samira, I was talking earlier about having that plan and actually practicing it. Phone and news boundaries that stick. And that's going to be the interesting one. I think, again, Samira was talking earlier about only checking in a couple of times a day. And I think that's really, really important. Reducing overthinking and anxiety. Oh, I wish I could do that. Better daytime energy and focus. Oh, I wish I had that. Or sleep support for children. Please pick one and let us know what you're thinking. I mean, this is one of those questions, Samira, that really should have all of the above. But which one would you go for in that one? I mean, I think for me, it's the overthinking anxiety, but I think that's then utterly linked to phone and news boundaries that stick.
Yeah, I think that for me, I would probably go with C, the phone and new boundaries, because again, people often want to reach out to the news on TV for that, or, video on their phone. Visual information is the most dangerous because we are visual beings. Our brain will respond with a much higher level of threat if it's receiving that through a visual source. Whereas if it's written, it's actually less of a threat. And do you need to go to that? Or what I prefer is actually just to stay with community chat groups The moms groups are brilliant. They know everything. They know it before anyone else as well. So I never need to actually check the news because they give me everything I need to know, but I will mute it for the entire day and I will check it just maybe once or twice a day. And that is a much healthier way of dealing with things.
That's fascinating. So just seeing the images that are associated to that social media news post or that news article, that's more damaging to our sort of cortisone levels than simply the text and just reading the text alone.
Yeah. Again, like I think I said earlier on, sometimes our brain doesn't really know the difference between um, a movie and what's reality. It needs you to give
Mm,
that narrative. So immediately when it receives that visual input, it can think it's reality. So within seconds, your stress act, the HPA axis, the stress axis is really, really activated in a very strong way just from seeing those images on your phone or on the TV. And there's just no need to do that. So the written format, it takes longer to get into to infiltrate the brain and for the brain to understand the written format. And that's a good thing. That delay helps to dampen that threat.
Path is asking a question, which is, and Path is saying, I'm 36, living in Dubai, currently getting less than 30 minutes of deep sleep. What's ideal for my age? I'm quite sleep sensitive, and even small sounds wake me up. Talk us through that because even in a normal day, and I'm pretty ill-educated on this one, but that need for deep sleep versus the different kind of stages of sleep, and then how difficult it is to get that deep sleep and how important is it or not to get that deep sleep and how much should we be focused or worried about that in a situation like this?
I get even on an ordinary day, I get so many people
Yeah.
asking this question, especially with the influx of wearables like Whoop and
Yeah.
the Aura Ring. People are very vigilant of they're very vigilant of protecting their sleep and what does it mean, and they have all this data but they don't really know what the value of that data is. So I'm very happy to shed some light on that at the moment actually. um, and this is a very loaded question because there's the current circumstance where the goalposts I said have changed, and then there's the
Yeah.
usual circumstance of what is normal, what's normal. What I want to really highlight is there's no such thing really as normal because everybody is so different and they have different needs. We do have parameters to support people to make sure they're not, wildly inadequate. So I'll go through some of those. So our sleep, we have them in 4 hourly cycles, 2 hours, 2 cycles ideally. And we go through different phases. We have different phases within that 4 hour cycle. So it's the slow wave sleep, which is the deep part of sleep. And the reason why that is so important is because that's the only time that our brain is able to clear any toxins that are in our brain. And it's the only time that we can consolidate any learning from our day. That's when the memory consolidation takes place, only during the deep sleep phase, the slow wave sleep. And it usually happens between 2 to 3 a.m. Um, Right now, I wouldn't worry about it too much because the goalposts have moved. So
Okay.
again, people can have this hypervigilance to their wearables, and then they get upset because they haven't hit certain markers, but they don't really understand what those markers are about. And actually, then inadvertently, you're actually just creating more of a threat for your brain because you're getting upset about something you don't really know you're getting upset about. So an unpopular
So don't
opinion,
lose
throw your
sleep over
wearable
losing
away.
sleep.
That's kind of the reason
Yeah.
why. I mean, my son has he has a Whoop, but I mean, thank you so much for shedding that. But I know, knowing myself, and knowing the way that I tend to really go into depth and analyze stuff, I would rather not look at these statistics and these markers and numbers just because
Hmm.
I think it would just kind of spin things for me. But I know that other people would like to know. They feel, like we said earlier, that they are a little bit more in control. But sometimes I think too much knowledge, but not knowing what to do with it, is also a bad thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree
More
more. I actually have
information
very
on.
strong opinion
Yeah. Yeah.
because a lot of the work that I do, so when I work with people and I try to support them to create changes in their brain, the whole point of doing that is to create a very, very deep internal understanding of what their brain needs. I want every
Mm.
single person that I work with to have that biofeedback, that intrinsic biofeedback. I want them without consciously knowing to get information from their body to know what they
Mhm.
need and meet that need. Now, the thing with the
Okay.
wearables is it's lovely to have that data and we do live in a very highly data-driven society. But what you are doing without realizing is you are outsourcing that very, very, very important skill to an external device. And the more you outsource it, the more you are moving away from your own intrinsic biofeedback. So you're actually hurting yourself because you are
Mm.
not learning about how to pick up on very small cues in your body that is giving you. And you're giving that to a device,
Absolutely.
which is most of
Yeah.
the time they're not 100% accurate. They're not even 90% accurate. So what's more
Yeah.
important is when you sleep, and then you wake up, and the first thing you should be thinking about is how do I feel? Do I feel
Mm.
rested? Do I feel rejuvenated? Do I feel ready for the day? Or do I feel absolutely exhausted? That means I didn't have a good sleep. And that is enough information. That is enough.
Yeah.
And also just knowing, checking the time before you go to bed, and then checking the time when you wake up to know roughly
Mhm.
how many hours. You don't need to go into such a high level of depth because all it does is
Yeah.
again create anxiety that you're not hitting.
Mm.
And then again, like these wearables, they have these graphs and visual data, and they're in red and green, and it's like a trigger, And the number of people that
Yeah.
say, I'm so upset today because I didn't
Yeah.
hit my marker. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
I think you've got bigger problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is
I
Well,
think
also,
we've
in
definitely
it's
not been
very
yeah.
entwined.
we've definitely not been
I'm
sleeping
just
on this webinar because I can't believe we've only got 5 minutes left. Sorry,
I
Maissa.
know.
I want to
No,
fire
I was
just
just gonna
because we've
say
had
thank you for
so
that.
many questions. Yeah, so
Yeah.
many questions coming in. I just want to fire a few of the audience questions at Samira just in the last 5 minutes, if that's okay. So we've got people like Bogdan's asking about chill out medication music at night. Will that help? Anuj is asking about nutrition, and he's also asked about supplements. And a member of the audience asked earlier. I mean, he's asking about magnesium. Oh, an audience member. I'm trying to scroll back to find who they are, was saying melatonin. Should they be taking extra melatonin? What are those quick things that help? I love Greg as well. Greg has chosen the unconventional thing to release stress before going to sleep. He chose tango. And it sounds like his routine more fun than mine for certainly. So the benefits of dancing events before, and that helps him reach better and deeper sleep. But also another member of the audience earlier, and I'm sorry because all the questions are coming so much. You asked around doing a sort of information dump on the day, whether that be kind of like a journaling, and is that helpful to get these things? So let's just move through some might be missed, some might be really, really helpful, but I just want to get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about all of these particular strategies. So I'll try and move through them quickly because I know that we'll be short on time otherwise. So first and foremost, before you do anything, please make sure that the first foundational thing that you're going to do is have a really great sleep hygiene practice. Because there's no point in approaching supplements or looking for external aids if you don't have the absolute basics in place. Because even with those supplements, they're not going to be successful if you are not cueing your brain, if you're not teaching your brain how it should be responding to particular cues in the environment several hours before. And if your sleep area is not hygienic, so if it is littered with devices, and the internet is switched on and there's that radiation, or it's not cold enough, not safe enough. So do the absolute basics, have a solid sleep hygiene practice, and really take care of the environment that you're sleeping in. If that's in place, now, given the circumstances at the moment, a lot of people are struggling with sleep and they've done everything they're supposed to be doing. There is the melatonin, but again, I really do advise speaking to a doctor, specifically, sleep specialists, but I also like to speak to psychiatrists. They know so much about sleep. Sleep is innately um, connected to your mental health and mood and your cognition. So the psychiatrists are wonderful people to be talking about supplements for sleep. Melatonin is a synthetic supplement, is a synthetic form of your natural hormone. So short term, people like to use it. I'm not really a big fan of melatonin. The reason being is, again, it disrupts your own internal circadian regulation. So if you keep topping it up with synthetic melatonin hormone, long term, you're going to dysregulate that system. So you might get some sleep short term, but long term, you will be dysregulated and you are actually destroying your own internal body system to regulate your sleep itself. So I'm not really a big fan of that. I much prefer magnesium glycinate has been, a lot of people swear by it. Again, please don't just grab for it. The dosage is very important. How old you are, your hormonal health, all these things have a really huge role to play in whether or not it is good for you. So please go and see a family medicine doctor, psychiatrist, people who are specialized in this area of medicine. One thing that I would say that a natural supplement that I'm a big fan of from a science is highly evidence-based is creatine. A lot of people associate creatine with bodybuilders and strength trainers, but actually it's one of the best supplements for the brain because it aids neurotransmitter practice and development. And so
Okay.
also the research is really, really high on showing that creatine is great for sleep deprivation at higher doses. So if you're going to take a supplement, I would highly recommend creatine, either a micro dose of 5 grams a day, or I'd like to take a higher dose of between 10 to 12 grams a day. And it's completely safe for every single person. But again, please do go and see a physician if you're not sure, if you have specific circumstances. The tango, I'm very, very keen on talking about the tango. I think it's wonderful that this particular individual has found something that works for them. And again, it's about finding helpful, healthy activities that helps your specific nervous system to relax. I know my son, he loves to play the piano, and I love to hear him play the piano. It is deeply relaxing for him. So, engaging in creative arts and performance is such a great way to connect with your nervous system and to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation part. This is why humans need to be so involved in the creative arts. A lot of people don't really understand that, but it's part and parcel of being a human. Is what helps us to connect with our nervous system and helps us to relax through creation. It doesn't matter if that actually is something wonderful or absolutely atrocious. It's the process and the art of experiencing and creating that is actually very, very healthy for us. So, big fan of that. I don't know if there's any other questions that I haven't covered that you had mentioned, Scott.
I think that's absolutely incredible. And we are out of time, sadly. We've crept slightly over, but I think it was definitely worth it. Samira, if people want to find out more or approach you for more information, where can they follow you, perhaps? Are you active on social media?
So I am very active on social media. I have my Instagram handle, which is Dr. Samira Cutts. I'm also on LinkedIn as Samira Cutts, and I also work clinically at King's College Hospital, London, and we do a lot of promotional health activities. So feel free to either email me or drop in and say hi to me in clinic. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Audience members, thank you for being so engaged today. I'm sorry if we didn't get through every single question, but we tried to get as many of them asked and answered as possible. Maissa, as always, thank you very much. You are
Thank
amazing as
you.
always. And Dr. Samira, thank you very much. On behalf
Yeah,
of
thank you.
Connect for Health, to all our audience members, thank you for tuning in. As soon as the session closes, you will be asked for feedback. Feedback is a gift. It helps us. Please get involved and let us know what you thought. And we will see you again soon for the next episode of Connect for Health. Stay safe and sleep well. Thank you.